Why has the expansion of suffrage been controversial? How have advocates of expanded suffrage used their rights under the First Amendment to achieve their goal? When you're ready, you may begin.
Everett M. Kirkpatrick, President of the Commission on Registration and Voting Participation, stated in response to the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that voting is the fundamental political right of citizens in a democracy. The right to vote is the right to influence officials and policy. To be denied the vote is to be denied the guarantee that one's interest will be taken into account when policy is made. Suffrage is the keystone to a republic. The foundation of the United States colonies granted white, land-owning male suffrage, while silencing the voices of the majority of women, African Americans, Native Americans, and other minority groups. It would take the utilization of First Amendment rights by minority groups to finally secure equal voting rights through additional amendments to the Constitution, such as the 19th and 26th Amendments.
In colonial society, the ability to vote was vested in the citizens with an interest in government, those with property. From the beginning, suffrage was highly contested by the people of the nation who already had the right to vote. These white men believed that people shouldn't have the right to vote unless they had a sufficient economic stake in society. They also feared historically powerless groups, like women, black men, and Native Americans, gaining political power, and they feared these people would demand fair representation in the government, thus causing civil emasculation as white men lost power. Men were afraid that women would seize the opportunity to break out into the public sphere and determine their own futures. Despite this conservative attitude, there was a major expansion of enfranchisement as settlers flooded into the abundant and cheap land in the United States. This allowed many settlers who were disenfranchised in Europe to vote in the new colonial legislators. The lack of consensus at the Constitutional Convention allowed the continuation of voting being reserved for white men through the lack of clarity in the language of the Constitution. The Constitution left it up to the states to determine which people were eligible to vote. Many of the early battles over voting occurred in the states. In 1776, New Jersey state constitution enfranchised all inhabitants who owned property and were residents of the state. This gave unmarried or widowed women who were allowed to own property and black men the right to vote in local elections. However, these two groups were disenfranchised in 1807 and 1844, respectively, with so-called election reform legislation.
The First Amendment was key to the civil rights movement in featuring various forms of free expression. Susan B. Anthony faced legal disabilities when voting on November 5, 1872, creating opportunity through her trial for illegal voting to spread arguments for women's suffrage to a large population of the public. The spread of suffrage to the public initiated others to follow and protest, and the Supreme Court to act towards the First Amendment, expanding the right of expression. Nonviolent protests developed expansion in suffrage due to the incorporation of the media and open participation, gaining more followers. In the Silent Sentinels, Alice Paul and the National Women's Party protested every day and night except Sunday to gain suffrage. In response to the protesting, President Wilson announced his support, as well as the National Women's Party, arguing citizens to vote for anti-suffrage senators and gaining support from states leading to the 19th Amendment, granting women's suffrage. In the 1958 case, NAACP v. Alabama, the Supreme Court protected the civil liberty rights of NAACP members from official harassment through the right of peaceful assembly. The heart of these movements were protest, assembly, and petition without interference from the government. The Greensboro sit-ins were nonviolent protests where African Americans took full advantage of the First Amendment to assemble for the cause of desegregation. The civil rights protest led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, prohibiting discrimination based upon race, color, sex, nationality, and religion. Students during the Vietnam War used the right to protest as a means of arguing that if they are old enough to die for one's country, they can vote in elections, leading to the Supreme Court decision to grant federal suffrage in Oregon v. Mitchell, and later added the 26th Amendment.
Despite the growth of suffrage for women, African Americans, and 18-year-olds, suffrage is still denied to many legal and illegal immigrants in many states due to Article 1, Section 4, allowing states to determine the times, places, and manner of holding elections. Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, and New York are among the first states to provide illegal immigrants voting rights in local elections. Arguments have been made in favor of having non-citizen residents be able to vote because they are part of the community and are directly affected by laws passed, such as those on schools, which their children are attending. On the other hand, the dissenters of this claim that these people did not earn the right to vote because they did not complete the citizenship process and are breaking the law by living here. In order to prevent illegal immigrants from casting votes, most states require valid ID, which some argue is an impediment in a functioning democracy.
You guys mentioned voter ID. Do you think that we should initiate a test for all citizens on their knowledge of contemporary issues facing the candidates they're electing before we allow them to vote?
I do not believe that we should test citizens in order for them to make a vote, because they can base their decision, of course, off of the tradition they hold or the party they have. Not everyone needs to be educated on the party they are wanting to elect, but in general, they shouldn't be able to have to test their knowledge, because some people are higher in the level of current events they know than others, I guess.
I would disagree with having ID voter laws, because if you are testing people for the ability to vote, you're denying them one of their rights guaranteed by the Constitution, that we should have a say in our government. This would allow a rising class of maybe whites or even females who have education to be able to work and have their vote in the government, whereas you would probably allow people such as illegal immigrants or even legal immigrants who are new to the country not have a say. As long as they have become a citizen, they may not know as much as those who have lived here, but they no longer have a say. So it's actually just denying your fundamental rights to have a say in government if you have these laws.
Should there be a cap on spending?
Should there be a cap on spending? I think there should be a cap on spending as long... I don't think there should be a cap on spending, because we've actually shown that we don't even have any say in what we're doing. We have such a high debt ceiling. If we were to have a cap on spending, we would see the economy fall apart, because we would no longer be actually helping the debt. And it's...
Cap on spending in elections.
Elections, yeah.
Oh, spending on elections.
We're talking about elections, that would be...
I was so confused. Okay, because I didn't know where that came from. So, spending on elections, definitely, because all you're showing is that you're corrupting politicians to be able to go with whoever is electing them. If you have big companies such as Goldman Sachs financing people, they're going to have a larger say in the government, because now these senators and congressmen feel beholden to these people in these large banks or other scenarios. They're no longer really for the people.
Yeah, big corporations funding a politician does face corruptness in society, because others do not have the chance to participate in that way. So that just gives a big corporation a step over minority groups who aren't able to participate with politicians in that function, I guess.
Do referendums, initiatives, and recalls give too much power to the people and take away power away from what the founders wanted in a Republican form of government?
What was the first part of your question?
So, with the additions of referendums, initiatives, and recalls, giving more direct democracy, if you will, have we gone too far away from a Republican form of government and bled into the fears of what a mob rule direct democracy could be, and the reasons why the founders created a republic?
There isn't really more of a mob rule, because with these referendums and initiatives, the people still have to they're not going to do this on every single issue. They're going to probably select these issues. And even if they can get these laws passed, you can still overturn them in legislation later on by Congress and senators and have that overcome. It's not necessarily this happens once it's set in stone. You can set precedent for the people to have more of a say, but it's not as if they can do this every single time and overcome their own delegates in Congress.
Referendum, recall, and initiative are? You guys can stop. Go ahead and stop the camera.
Referendum isn't. to voters